All right, so I guess this is take number four. Um, but anyway, I've got some opinions here. I'm far from the type of person who has always supported the president, and I mean any president or anything like that. But Trump is so bad, and the Democrats are also so terrible that I might have no choice but to vote for Biden if he runs for a second term. So I know that's, a bit of a contradictory statement, but we're just in such a tight spot that, we're not having as many options as we used to. It's not that I like Biden, and I feel Democratic leadership has dropped the ball more often than they've held it, and both parties have similar financial backers, but the vast majority of alternate options have been choked off in this perpetual game of good prez, bad prez. Of course, another option would be to try to move if some Trumpian candidate wins, but I don't have a whole lot of money and few connections outside of the US. So that's an iffy option right off the bat. And I'm not really alone in that regard. I know a lot of people would have a tough time moving. But I also know that under an authoritarian, theocratic nutcase, I might not even have a choice but to try fleeing the garbled mess of a country he'll end up creating with his cult. Or I suppose let's be fair, it could be a she. We might have a lady theocrat in charge. Let's be progressive here. Anyway, my point is that I don't have a side other than what external forces will put me on, or any reasons other than my perceived common sense to support either party. It's fair to say I have very little in common politically with a lot of people, actually, especially with the way this country appears to still be headed. The problem isn't that I'm wasting my vote or even that you're wasting your vote. Really, one of the problems is actually representative democracy itself, in general, which we have become too accustomed to rather than direct democracy, which wouldn't have so many people locked out of the process by definition. I want people to have more say over their working lives and for them to have privacy. Obviously, issues like gay marriage and other private decisions between consenting adults should not be up to others to decide, or whether I can smoke some Mary Jane or not. And honestly, I say this as someone who does not really smoke pot. And, I'm one of those people who, from basically the very start, supported gay marriage. And, I'm not a gay dude. As far as I can tell, I'm not even a bisexual dude. But, I believe people should have, freedom basically to make their own decisions to a large extent. I mean, if you can prove that a decision is, going to directly put me in danger, then all right. I guess we can have that debate, that discussion. But let's face it, a lot of the things that people do, in their own private lives are not very harmful at all. Personally, I want a democratized economy wherein workers and consumers have greater say in issues that impact them directly, rather than continually handing our money, power, land, resources, and decision making power over to increasingly unaccountable so called private oligarchs who mismanage the shit out of everything and screw people over anyway. And that idea of mine is considered radical by some, which is ironic because some of the same people who, consider that idea extreme are some of the same people who themselves, you know, criticize elites or whatever. They're putting on that act, the whole populist uh, fakery that they're putting on. Well, my populism is the real kind, damn it. Well, it's funny how any idea that challenges the rich and powerful and the would-be theocrats is considered radical by the right wingers, isn't it? And one of the ironic things about that is, if you've got theocrats, well, they're going to be even more against freedom because they're trying to tell you quite directly what you can even think. That's even going further and deeper than, just bossing people around a little bit. That's actually getting right down to the core of who you are and what you believe. But apparently, some right wingers don't see a problem with that. Whatever, I guess. I am unfortunately also faced with the reality that we're still far from any direct democracy, and people have barely begun building such a thing. So, really, I am definitely feeling pressured to vote more than in the past, and it's definitely a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. I'm not saying I'm going to vote out of some sense of optimism here. It's one of those things where if I don't vote, then what else am I going to do? You know, like, it's not like I can't do anything, but it's definitely one of the foremost options that I can see. I could try to be more of an anarchist type or whatever, but I mean, I'd be kidding myself if I did that. There is no rule by the people scenario currently, at least in any significant form. I even live in a small town where such a thing might, in some ways, be more plausible, and there's less of that, because people probably do know their neighbors better where I live than in some, big fancy city or something like that. And there still isn't as much of that stuff going around here as there could be. But anyway, moving on, I won't be bold enough to say my vote doesn't matter, nor does it seem like issues can never be resolved or improved through voting. However, when it comes to actual democracy, I think it should be emphasized that voting is just one avenue of its expression, sort of the technical process, rather than the whole thing. See, I mean, with the way people talk about voting currently, and obviously for quite a long time, they have treated it like it's the only thing you can do or the first and primary thing you can do. But it's not. It's not. Our decisions don't have to be all relegated to politicians or, these corporate entities or even to religious figures. We can do things more democratically and more directly without specifically tying it to any sort of organization. Democracy can be generalized, I would say. Equality of opportunity and access is actually the more important and major component of democracy. Voting is just a possible part of it and not the most important part. You might say that democracy has different gradations, and voting is one of those. Quite simply, there are some issues that our political system isn't putting up to a vote anyway, where the only voting we can do is with our feet or our pocketbooks. That's just the reality currently. I mean, there are people who are organizing unions right now, and I mean, you can tell they're having success because the mainstream media is actually paying a little bit more attention to union activities. And that's actually a good thing. There's some potential there. I would say that back in the 1990s, when I was still in high school and just barely starting to pay attention to politics, there really wasn't as much attention being paid to unions. And that was pretty much true through the 2000s and the 2010s. But now I would say people are being forced to kind of pay attention to it a little bit more, right? So, as the wealthy and well connected swallow up more land and resources and transform society into their property, voting and elections become more of a spectacle and not a respectable spectacle. It's a game in which the common man is supposed to lose. It's like a sports thing, only with the results being rigged, where you pick your team and stick with it, but you're always going to be on the losing team yet you've got to treat it like it's winning for you. It's party and personality rather than policy and philosophy, first and foremost. And, on the campaign trail, it's about one upmanship more than it is about vision. And of course, when it is about vision, it's like the kind of visions you get when you're beat over the head with a club. They're delusions that have very little to do with reality. You can see the cartoon image of the person knocked out with the birds and stars flying over their head and the high pitched sound effects. That's kind of like the vision that America is in right now. The stunned and bewildered vision. The delusion of seeing the Virgin Mary on a slice of toast or Jesus on a slice of toast. Um, by the way, they should market those as like a thing you can buy at the store. I think I would actually buy that shit. I'm not gonna lie. But anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked here. I'm improvising. Uh, but it's no wonder that in most parts of the country, you can look down on people who will not publicly endorse someone for president, although no one would dare say such a thing to their face. They would not bitterly condemn the non-vote, like they probably wouldn't get in their face. They wouldn't be, how come you didn't vote, you son of a bitch? It's like a lot of online chatter, a lot of shaming online, where it's more cowardly. And there's usually not even a conversation about it. Like, how come you didn't vote? How come you voted for this person and not that one? And, I can be guilty of that too, to a small degree. I should really be more intuitive when it comes to talking to people I disagree with and maybe try to find out why they're embracing this idea that I find so negative. And maybe that could be a part of talking them out of it, treating them like they're a little bit more on an equal level to myself. Or I suppose because I'm talking about a general audience here, you know, to ourselves. Anyway, it seems like everyone just decides their candidate is best, and they try to deny another candidate votes by as much as possible. And that's like a game, really. In fact, people have literally they placed bets on whether Trump announces a 2024 run before the midterms. It's like a sport, and the outcomes of policy become abstractions, and we too far often forget these politicians and these policies will either positively or negatively impact people's lives. Even right now, people, that they're quick to just treat these things as like jokes or downplay them, pretend the danger is not there, but it actually is. In some cases, it can literally be a matter of life or death, yet we transform it into a gamble. Um, like I said, certain things should not be up to a vote, like certain aspects of our private lives, the fact that people are considering, banning like contraceptives and stuff like that. That in itself is a scandal. Like, why in the world should that even be up to a vote? That is like a personal decision. Like a lot of issues, like with abortion, people say that's between a person and their doctor. Well, with contraception and birth control, that's not necessarily as much up to a doctor normally, is it? So, like, again, that's going even further into people's private lives and screwing with us. Because obviously, contraception, well, you haven't even conceived a child yet. That's actually what you do to help yourself, to avoid conceiving a child. Like with a condom or the, the birth prevention pill. I can't even think of words right now. But anyway, those, no one in their right mind would say that that's akin to like killing a baby, like, or whatever. But I guess that's the direction we're headed down. By this point, it almost seems like Republican voters vote primarily for someone to own the libs, not basing it at all on well considered policy objectives. And part of owning the libs is being an outright authoritarian, apparently. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, selling out to some of those very same authoritarian interests is apparently called fairness, compromise, and realism. Uh, I call it bullshit, but we all call things different things. I mean, it's two options now. You have option number one. If someone is not the evilest one, then how can they possibly be seen as an option? Then we've got option two. If we can't vote for someone who is still pretty evil and terrible, but vaguely better on a few issues, or at least gentler in their speech and mannerisms, then how can they not be a valid option? It's really the logical problem of evil at that point, isn't it? You know, it's it's what Ralph Nader called the evil of two lessers. But what about the third option for anyone who has common sense, where maybe they just are on the right side of history by supporting a candidate who arguably really deserves it and who has our interests in mind and who won't be peeking and prying into our private lives. But those types are always branded as unelectable, especially these days, or maybe extremist, and that's even more so if they don't kiss rich boy ass well enough. So we're perpetually trapped by the two-party system that bounces back and forth between neo-fascism and neo-fascism light. I don't think this observation makes me stupid. I don't think it makes me hostile to the Democrats necessarily. In fact, if the Democrats did a great job, I wouldn't be criticizing them. It doesn't make me un-American either. All right, like how is wanting more privacy un-American? That's like the most American goddamn thing you could ask for. you know, it's it's sort of implied by a lot of traditional conservative arguments anyway. Like, aren't they in favor of small government and that kind of stuff? Well, how is it small government if you've got like Ron DeSantis over in Florida saying, teachers, you can't mention the existence of gender identity to any students because that's harmful to them. Like, well, that means you can't tell kids that they have a mom and dad. Like if you're thinking that through logically, it's just the dumbest shit ever. Um, but that's just another example of where we're headed. The motto of the Great Seal of the United States is supposed to be E pluribus unum, meaning from many one. The motto shouldn't be from many dung. But, that's kind of what we're headed towards right now, a big festering pile of dung. With, oh well, I'm just going to move on from that image. This is just me thinking outside the box, I guess. In a scary and real world where voting out of fear is increasingly the only option left, aside from not voting at all, which increasingly is an unrealistic option too. I mean, sometimes the only way to dig yourself out of a hole is to I don't know, keep digging, I guess. I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's just one of those things. Like many people out there, I just want more options, better options, and preferably some that don't make me feel like I'm potentially backing a do-nothing or a megalomaniac candidate who might destroy us all. I just think that would be refreshing. So anyway, that's about all I've got to say for now. Have a nice day.